Hey guys, welcome to the second video in this two-part series where we look at 32 important Linux commands which I believe every software developer should know. In this video, we're going to look at the following 16 Linux commands. So let's jump right into it. CD stands for change directory and is commonly used to do just what the name suggests, change the current working directory. So right now I'm within the Linux commands directory, and I've created a subdirectory called folder. To change into folder, I can simply type cd folder. To move back to the Linux commands folder, I can use cd .. You can also specify an absolute path to the folder that you wish to cd into. So for example, if I wanted to cd into the documents folder, I can just specify the absolute path to the folder like so. Cat or concatenate is a versatile command that's frequently used. So cat can be used to print the content of a file to the console. It can also be used to quickly create and populate a file. Append the contents of one file to another. And even copy and overwrite the content of one file into another. Typing top into your console opens a real-time list of processes running on your machine. You can think of this as being similar to the task manager on Windows. Some of the important processes to take note of are the command names, the CPU usage, and the memory usage. To exit this interactive terminal opened by top, simply hit the Q key on your keyboard. Alias is commonly used to give shorter names to commands that may be quite verbose to type out every single time. For example, within this current directory, I've got 3 files and 3 folders. If I wanted to delete all these files and folders, I can use rm-r space star or asterisk. However, if I use this command very frequently, it might be a bit annoying to type it out every single time. Instead, what I can do is create an alias called remove all and set its value to the remove command as so. Now I can use the remove all command just as any other Linux command. You can see that it's wiped out all the files and folders within this directory. Unalias can be used to remove any aliases that you've created before, which you may no longer wish to use. Less allows you to view files without opening an editor, preventing you from accidentally modifying the file. To close the file, type Q on your keyboard. Nano opens an editor that allows you to create, view, and edit files within your terminal window. Currently, there are no files within this directory. Using Nano, I'm going to create a file called helloworld.txt. I can then save this file by pressing Ctrl X on my keyboard and then hitting the Y key, followed by Enter. Now we can see that there's a file called helloworld.txt. Again, using Nano, instead of creating a file, I'm going to open helloworld.txt and modify its contents. The Nano editor has a lot of features that can be used within it. However, I won't be covering those features in this video. Similar to Nano, Vim is another text editor that allows you to create, edit, and modify files within your terminal window. Once again, I'm going to create a file called helloworld.txt, but this time I'm going to do it with Vim. We can also edit the contents of the file. Vim also has a lot of additional features and functionalities which can be used with it. However, I won't be covering those features in this video either. Grep is a command line tool that's used to search for patterns. Over here, I've got a file called helloworld.txt, and if we look at this file, it's just got the words hello world and goodbye written in it. So let's say I wanted to search for the word goodbye within this file. We can do this using grep. So to use grep, you type the command name, which is grep, followed by the string pattern that you're trying to look for, in this case goodbye, and we specify where we want to look for this pattern. And we can see that grep is able to match this pattern within the file. We can do additional stuff like print out the line at which this word or pattern exists. And we can do that using the -n flag. And we can also get a count of the number of occurrences of the word goodbye by using the -c flag. Grep allows you to do a bunch of other stuff like case-insensitive searches, regular expression searches, and binary file searches. If you want to learn more about this command, I highly recommend reading its man page. Find can be used to look for files that you know exist, but can't remember the location of those files. To use the find command, we need to specify a starting location to start the search. In this case, I'm using dot to indicate that I want to start the search within the Linux commands folder. We then need to specify what exactly we're looking for. In this case, I'm letting the find command know that I'm looking for files whose names consist of the letters py, or in other words, I'm looking for Python files. The asterisk over here represents any sequence of characters. So by adding an asterisk before pi, I'm letting the find command know that the file must end with the letters py. On executing the command, we get the names and locations of all the Python-based files within the Linux commands directory. Zip is used to compress files or folders. So the Linux commands directory has just a single folder within it called large folder, and I want to compress this folder. I can do so with the zip command by first specifying what I want to name the compressed folder, followed by the name of the folder that I wish to compress, in this case large folder. On running the command, we can see that zip has successfully compressed the folder. Unzip can be used to decompress or unzip zipped files. So within the Linux commands folder, I've got a zip file called compressfolder.zip. To unzip a zip file, simply specify the name of the zip file when using the unzip command. We can see that after running the unzip command, a folder called large folder was extracted from the zip file. DU or disk usage is used to estimate the disk space used by certain files or folders. So I'm currently located within my desktop. Typing du-h specifies the disk usage by each of the files and folders on the desktop. The -h flag stands for human readable, and it just prints out the disk usage in bytes, megabytes, kilobytes, and so on. I can also check the disk usage of a specific file or folder by specifying that file name or folder name after the du command. Curl can be used to retrieve files from specified URLs or IP addresses. By default, curl might not be available on your machine, so you might need to install it. So let's say we wanted to retrieve a single file from a GitHub repository without having to clone the entire repository. We can do this quite easily using the curl command. So I'm going to try and retrieve a file from my GitHub repository. And to do so, I provide curl with the URL that leads to that file. On running the command, we can see that curl hasn't saved that file by default onto our system. Instead, it's just fetched the contents of that file and printed it onto the console. So instead, if we want to save the file to our current working directory, we use the -o flag and specify the file name that we wish to save the file as. chown is used to change the owner and group associated with a file or directory. So within the Linux commands directory, if I do an ls, you can see that I've got a single subdirectory called folder. If we list the contents of the Linux commands directory in the long format, you can see that the user associated with folder is just me or my user, along with a group called staff. And by the way, a group is just a collection of users. So let's say I wanted to change the owner of this file to a different user. I can use the chown command prefixed with sudo, followed by the name of the user who I want to make the new owner of this directory. So I've got another user on my system called guest user. And finally, we specify the file or folder for which we want to change the user. After running the command and entering my password, if I print out the contents of the directory in long format again, we can see that the user associated with this folder has been changed to guest user. To change the group associated with the folder, we can do something similar. But at this time, we prefix the new group name with a colon. So I'd like to change the group from staff to a group on my computer called everyone. On running the command, we can see that the group has changed from staff to everyone. If you wish to change both the user and group associated with the folder, you can do so by separating the user name and group name with a colon. And now you can see I've changed the user back to my user, which is Aditya Ravi, and the group back to the staff group. chmod is used to modify the permissions or file modes associated with different files or directories. So within the Linux commands directory, you can see that I've got a single file and a single folder. And if we look at the contents of this directory in the long format, we can see in relation to folder, we've got a user, which is just my username, a group called the staff group, and this cryptic looking string of characters over here. These characters represent the permissions associated with folder. So for example, the first character D indicates that we're looking at a directory, whereas if we look at the first character for file, a dash indicates that we're looking at a file. The next three characters indicate the permissions associated with the user or owner of this folder, So my user has permissions to read, write, and execute the contents of this folder. And execute just means being able to cd into the folder. The next 3 characters indicate the permissions associated with the staff group, and it says that anyone who's a member of the staff group can read the contents of the folder, but they cannot write to or execute the contents of the folder. The last 3 characters indicate the permissions associated with everyone else who isn't this user or part of this staff group. And so it just says that everyone else can read from the folder, but they can't write to or execute the contents of the folder. So chmod allows us to modify these permissions over here. So let's say I wanted to grant the staff group permissions to write and execute the contents of the folder. So I can do that by typing the name of the command, followed by G, which means I'm referring to a group, a plus, which means that I want to add certain permissions to this group, and a W and X. After that, we specify which file or folder we're changing the permissions for. In this case, folder. So once again, if you read this command, it says that we'd like to modify the permissions associated with the group, which is staff, and we'd like to add permissions to write to and execute the contents of this folder. On running the command and printing out the contents of the file, we can see that the permission for the staff group has changed to a read, write, and execute. Similarly, if we wish to take away a certain permission, we can use a minus instead of a plus. So over here I'm saying that I wish to take away the read, write, and execute permissions for the group, which is staff. And if we print out the permissions associated once again, you can see that it's been changed. If we wish to change the permissions for the user, the group, and everyone else, we can do it like this. So what this is saying is that we'd like to change the permissions for the user, which is me, the group, which is staff, and others, which is everyone else. And we want to set it to be exactly equal to RWX, which is a read, write, and execute permission. And we can see that the permissions have changed. By the way, using these characters to change the permission is referred to the symbolic mode of the chmod command. We can also use a numeric mode for this command, which basically uses this table shown on the screen to change the permissions of a file or folder. Let's say I wish to give the user, the group, and everyone else only read permissions to folder. I'd do it like so. If we wish to give just the user read, write, and execute permissions, but everyone else just a read permission, we can do it like this. So if you haven't figured it out already, the first number represents the read, write, and execute permissions of the user. The second number represents the permissions of the group, and the last number represents the permissions of everyone else. So that brings us to the end of this 2-part series. I hope you learned something useful from these 2 videos and found these Linux commands useful. If you enjoyed these videos, then consider supporting this channel by hitting that like and subscribe button. And if you have any recommendations or requests for future videos, then leave that down in the comment section below. But for now, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.